The first time I heard him laugh, I hated it. Not because it was ugly, but because it was beautiful in a way I could no longer see. I used to think the world ended the day I lost my sight. Colors, faces, music sheets, everything I had relied on disappeared overnight in a fog of darkness. I clawed at the edges of my new reality, desperate to pretend I wasn't drowning, that the blind man in the mirror wasn't me. Now, I teach music at a high school in Boston, fumbling through the days with a practiced smile. My students never ask how it feels to walk through life without light. They hear my voice, they feel the rhythm in my teaching, and maybe that's enough for them. But it's not enough for me. The truth is, music is the only way I still feel alive. Each note I play reminds me I haven't completely vanished into the dark. And then, one Tuesday afternoon in late October, a stranger walked into my classroom, carrying with him the scent of rain-soaked wool and confidence that seemed almost intrusive. "Mr. Reyes?" His voice was warm, deep, steady, the kind of voice that could argue in court and still sound like a lullaby. "Yes," I answered, my hands pausing on the keys. I could hear the creak of expensive leather shoes crossing the wooden floor. He didn't belong here. Too polished. Too sharp. "I'm Adrian Cole, a lawyer." He stopped just a few feet away. "I have a proposition for you." Proposition. The word made me bristle. Men like him didn't come into classrooms like mine unless they wanted something. I hated that my chest tightened just at the sound of his voice. "What kind of proposition?" There was a pause, then a sound like someone exhaling slowly, as though preparing to cross a line. "I want you to be my only love." I laughed. God help me, I laughed like a madman. The absurdity of it cracked through the suffocating weight of my day. Who walks into a blind music teacher's life and throws that at him? He couldn't be serious. "You must be lost," I said flatly. "The dating apps are down the street." But he didn't laugh. "No," he said firmly. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Silence pressed between us, heavy as a storm about to break. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen even in the darkness that had consumed me for years. Adrian started showing up after that. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with an armful of legal documents he claimed he needed to review in a quieter place. He would sit in the back of my classroom, listening while I guided students through scales and chords. I hated how quickly I got used to the sound of him breathing in the corner, how his presence carved a space into my world that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. One evening, when the students had gone and the school hallways echoed with their absence, Adrian lingered. I was at the piano, letting my fingers wander across the keys, when he asked softly, "Do you miss it?" "Miss what?" "Seeing the world." The question was like a knife twisted into a wound I'd tried to bury. My chest tightened. "Every damn second," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I miss the faces, the colors, the stupid things like the way rain looks on glass. Music's the only thing that stayed." I felt him move closer. His hand brushed mine on the piano, tentative, almost afraid. "Then let me be your eyes," he whispered. Something inside me cracked open. I hated him for saying it. I hated myself more for wanting it to be true. As weeks turned into months, the edges of my life blurred into something new. He became the constant I didn't know I craved. He described the world to me in ways I'd never imagined, turning courtrooms into theaters, skyscrapers into giants, sunsets into something I could almost touch. Yet, with every moment of closeness came a shadow of fear. I wasn't whole. Not the way he deserved. I wasn't sure I could be anyone's only love, when I barely knew how to love myself anymore. And then came the night it all broke. I had been grading music theory papers when he walked in, tension dripping from every step. I didn't need sight to know something was wrong. "Adrian," I said carefully, "what happened?" He dropped a folder onto my desk. I flinched at the sound. "They're trying to ruin me," he said, his voice low, angry. "A case high profile, political. They'll dig into everything. They'll use anything against me." I didn't breathe. I knew where this was going. "You mean us?" I said. He didn't answer. The silence was confirmation enough. My chest ached. "So what now? You cut me out before they do?" That's the plan. Don't, he snapped. Then his voice broke, softer, desperate. Don't make it sound like that. You don't know how bad it can get. They'll tear you apart just to get to me. The irony was cruel. I couldn't see the world anymore, but I could see this with excruciating clarity. He was afraid of loving me openly, and for the first time I wasn't sure if I could forgive that. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that I wasn't a porcelain doll waiting to be shattered under public scrutiny, that I could fight my own battles. But the words got stuck in my throat, tangled between fury and heartbreak. Do you even hear yourself? I finally whispered. You barged into my life, Adrian. You made promises spoken and unspoken. And now you're telling me love isn't worth the risk. He stepped closer, the air between us shrinking. I could feel the warmth of his body even without touching him. It's not that simple, he murmured. His voice, always so steady in the courtroom, cracked. I could lose everything. I laughed bitterly. And I already lost everything. You think I care about the tabloids? The headlines? I live in darkness, Adrian. But with you, I feel like I still matter. That shut him up. The silence stretched, suffocating, until I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed back from the desk, my hands trembling as I searched for my cane. The scrape of wood on the floor echoed like a gunshot. If you're going to run, I said, do it now. Don't string me along. I've survived worse than heartbreak. But don't you dare make me believe I was enough when you never meant it. I turned toward the door, feeling the familiar burn of tears I refused to let fall. Behind me, I heard him move, a sharp inhale, the sound of fists tightening, and then nothing. No footsteps, no plea, just silence. That silence broke me more than any words could have. The days that followed were heavy with absence. My classroom felt colder without the sound of his quiet breaths in the back row. The coffee cups he used to leave on my desk in the mornings never appeared again. I told myself it was better this way, that he had chosen the world he belonged to, and I would keep mine intact. But nights were cruel. I'd sit at the piano in my apartment, fingers moving aimlessly over the keys, trying to drown the echo of his voice. The music felt hollow, like even the notes were grieving. My students noticed. One of them, a bold kid named Kevin, finally asked me if I was okay. I lied. Of course I lied. How do you explain to a 17-year-old that the person who made you feel alive again had decided you weren't worth the fight? It was a Friday evening, 2 weeks later, when I heard the knock on my door. My stomach twisted. No one came to visit me unannounced. I hesitated before opening it, cane in hand like a weapon I wasn't brave enough to use. The moment the door creaked, the smell hit me first rain, expensive cologne, and the faint trace of exhaustion. Ethan. His voice. My throat tightened. Why are you here? I couldn't stay away. The words came out broken, desperate. I tried. God knows I tried. But every case, every client, every courtroom, I heard your voice in the silence. I saw you in the dark corners of my mind. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to drag him inside and collapse into his arms. I did neither. You made your choice, I said. I made the wrong one, he shot back instantly. And I can't undo that unless you let me try again. He stepped closer, the floor creaking under his weight. His hand brushed mine where it rested on the doorframe. That touch undid me in ways I hated. You don't know what you're asking, I whispered. Yes, I do, he said fiercely. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I'm not a coward, that I can stand with you even if the world stands against us. His voice cracked. Please. I should have sent him away. I should have protected what little was left of me. But instead I stepped aside. And just like that, the lawyer who once broke me walked back into my life. The next weeks were a blur of stolen moments. He would sneak into my apartment late at night, his tie loosened, his eyes carrying the weight of the battles he fought outside. We'd sit on the floor by the piano, me leaning against the cold wood, him leaning against me. He told me about cases, about the cruelty of men in suits who cared more about power than justice. I told him about my students, about the way music gave them wings. Sometimes, when words weren't enough, We let silence fill the spaces. His fingers would lace with mine, grounding me in a way sight never could. But reality has sharp teeth. It was only a matter of time before someone saw him leaving my building, before whispers turned into rumors, and rumors into headlines. Blind music teacher caught in scandal with rising star lawyer. That was the headline Kevin shoved into my hands one morning, his voice trembling with anger. I didn't need sight to know the ink screamed betrayal. My heart sank. Not for May had nothing left to lose, but for Adrian. When he came to see me that night, I didn't let him speak. "You need to walk away," I said flatly. "Ethan." No, my voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "This is your career. Your life. You worked too damn hard to throw it away for me." He moved closer, his hand cupping my cheek. I felt the tremor in his fingers. "You're my life," he whispered. And God help me, I believed him. But believing wasn't enough to quiet the storm. The following week, I was called into the principal's office. Parents had complained. They didn't want their children influenced by a teacher who was the subject of tabloid scandals. I sat there, blind eyes fixed on the void, while the principal's words cut through me like glass. "We'll have to let you go, Ethan." I nodded, numb. By the time I walked out of the office, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my cane. My world, what little I had rebuilt, was collapsing again. And when Adrian came rushing into my apartment that evening, panic in his voice, I didn't know if I wanted to kiss him or curse him. "They fired me," I said, my voice hollow. His silence told me everything. This love wasn't just a risk anymore. It was destruction. I didn't cry when the principal fired me. I didn't cry when I walked out of that office, the echoes of my cane striking the tiled floor, swallowing me whole. I didn't even cry when I stepped into the street, the autumn air cold and sharp against my face. No, the tears came later, when I sat at the piano, alone, and pressed my hands down on the keys so hard the chords crashed into one another like broken glass. That was when the dam burst, when the silence of my apartment filled with the sound of a man who had already lost too much. And then, of course, he came. Adrian's knock was hurried, frantic, as if he knew I was falling apart behind the door. I should have ignored it. I should have let him walk away again, saved both of us the inevitable ruin. But when I opened the door and felt his arms wrap around me, all I could do was collapse into him. "They can't do this," he whispered into my hair. His voice was raw, frantic. "They can't take this from you." "They already did," I said, my voice hollow. He pulled back just enough for me to feel the heat of his breath against my lips. "Then I'll fight for you. I'll burn the whole damn system to the ground if I have to." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the weight of reality pressed down harder than hope. "This isn't your battle," I said quietly. "The hell it isn't." His hands gripped my shoulders, firm and unyielding. "Ethan, you don't get it. You're not just some chapter in my story. You are the story. Every case, every win, it means nothing if I can't come home to you." I felt my chest tighten, my resolve crumbling under his words. "You're going to lose everything," I whispered. "Then let me lose it," he said fiercely. "As long as I don't lose you." The next weeks blurred into chaos. The tabloids circled like vultures. Headlines painted me as a scandal, a distraction, a liability. Adrian's opponents in court twisted the story, branding him reckless and immoral. His firm demanded explanations. His family, wealthy, pristine, painfully traditional, called him a disgrace. And through it all, he refused to let go of me. Every night, he came to my apartment, his voice hoarse from the day's battles. Sometimes he was angry, sometimes defeated, sometimes quiet in a way that scared me more than shouting ever could. But always, always, he reached for me, grounding himself in the rhythm of my heartbeat. One night, I asked the question I had been too afraid to voice. "Why me?" He froze. I could hear the catch in his breath. "Ethan," he swallowed hard. "Do you know what it's like to stand in a room full of liars? To watch people twist words until truth means nothing? I spent years living like that. And then I met you. You don't pretend. You don't wear masks. You're real. You're Everything I didn't know I needed. I wanted to answer, to tell him he was my light in the dark. But the words lodged in my throat, choked by fear, because I knew what was coming. And I was right. It happened on a Thursday. Adrian had a court hearing, a major case that could make or break his career. I had planned to stay home, to keep myself out of sight. But when I woke that morning, something inside me whispered that I needed to be there. So I went. I stood in the back of the courtroom, my cane tapping against the marble floor, listening as Adrian's voice filled the air. Strong, confident, unyielding. But then the attack came. Opposing counsel brought it up. My name, my blindness, my scandal. They painted me as evidence of his instability, a weakness that proved he couldn't be trusted with power. My chest tightened with every word. I wanted to vanish, to melt into the shadows. And then Adrian did the unthinkable. He didn't deny it. He didn't deflect. He turned to the judge, to the jury, to the world, and he spoke. Yes, he said firmly. I'm in love with Ethan Reyes. He's a music teacher. He's blind. And he's the strongest man I know. If that makes me unfit, so be it. But I won't apologize for loving him. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, outrage. And me? I stood there, frozen, my heart cracking wide open. Later, when the chaos had subsided, when the trial ended in a blur I could barely follow, Adrian found me waiting outside. You didn't have to do that, I said, my voice shaking. Yes, I did, he replied, his tone steady, unflinching. You just ruined your career. He laughed softly, bitter and beautiful. Then maybe it wasn't worth keeping. For a moment, the city noise faded. It was just us, standing in the chill of a Boston evening, our breath clouding the air. I can't be your downfall, I whispered. And I can't be without you, he answered. His lips brushed mine, gentle at first, then desperate, as if sealing a vow neither of us could afford to break. But love doesn't silence the world. The backlash grew louder. Protesters outside the courthouse. Hate mail delivered to my apartment. Parents demanding I never be allowed near their children again. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to prove them wrong. But night after night, the weight pressed heavier. Until finally, one night, I broke. I can't do this anymore, I whispered into the darkness, my fingers trembling on the piano keys. Adrian looked up from where he sat on the floor beside me. His face was drawn, exhaustion carved into his features. Don't say that. It's tearing us apart, I said, my voice cracking. Look at you. You're drowning. And me? I'm nothing but an anchor dragging you down. He moved fast, kneeling in front of me, his hands cupping my face. You're not an anchor, he said fiercely. You're the reason I fight. Without you, none of it matters. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I don't want to be your reason. I just want to be enough. His forehead pressed against mine, his voice breaking. You are. God, Ethan, you're more than enough. For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe him. But the storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering strength. Because the world had decided loving him was a crime. And we were about to find out just how high the price of love could be. The storm reached its peak the night Adrian's firm demanded his resignation. He came to me with the letter in his hand, his voice shaking though he tried to hide it. They want me gone, he said flatly. Effective immediately. Couldn't breathe. For weeks, I had told myself that this was inevitable, that one way or another, the world would crush us for daring to love outside its rigid boundaries. But hearing it, seeing the cracks in his steady voice, it broke something inside me. You should fight it, I whispered. Don't give them the satisfaction. He dropped the letter on the table, the paper crumpling under his fist. I don't care anymore, Ethan. Let them take the job. Let them take everything. As long as they don't take you. The weight of his words hung heavy between us. My throat tightened. Adrian. He reached for me, his hands trembling as they cupped my face. I need you to hear me. I didn't choose you instead of my career. I chose you because you're my life. Everything else, cases, clients, victories, it was noise. You're the only thing that ever mattered. Tears burned behind my eyes, and for once, I didn't fight them. I let them fall. The backlash didn't disappear overnight. The tabloids still spat venom. People still whispered. But something changed in the weeks that followed. Adrian didn't hide anymore. He walked beside me down crowded streets, his hand steady in mine. He kissed me in public, unashamed. He spoke openly about us, even when it cost him invitations, partnerships, old friends. And strangely, the more unapologetic he became, the less power the whispers held. It wasn't easy. I still woke up some nights drenched in fear, the echoes of shame pressing against me. But Adrian was always there, his hand on my back, his voice in my ear, his heartbeat steady against my chest. He never let me face the darkness alone. One morning, a letter arrived at my apartment. It was from a private arts academia place I'd never applied to, never even heard of. "We'd like to offer you a position," the letter read. "Your story has reached us, and we believe our students could learn not just from your music, but from your strength." I held the paper in shaking hands, my visionless eyes burning with disbelief. Adrian read it aloud again, his voice breaking halfway through. When he finished, he pulled me into his arms and laughed, the sound wet with tears. "You see," he whispered into my hair, "the world doesn't get to decide your worth. You do. And they're finally starting to see it." For the first time in a long time, hope bloomed in my chest. The day I started at the academy, Adrian walked me to the gates. The students greeted me with excitement, curiosity, respect. Not one of them saw me as broken. They saw me as their teacher. That night, when we got home, I sat at the piano, my fingers gliding over the keys. The melody was soft, new, fragile like a fresh beginning. Adrian leaned against the piano, watching me the way he always did, as if I was the only thing in the room that mattered. "Play it again," he said softly. So I did, and as the last notes faded into silence, I turned toward where I knew he stood. "Adrian," I whispered. "Yeah, thank you for choosing me, for staying." He moved closer, his hand sliding into mine. "No, Ethan. Thank you for letting me love you." His lips brushed mine, tender and sure, sealing the promise we had both fought so hard to keep. Months later, the world still wasn't perfect. There were still headlines, still critics. But there were also concerts where my students played their hearts out. There were dinners where Adrian and I laughed until we couldn't breathe. There were nights we lay tangled in each other's arms, the chaos of the world outside fading to nothing. I had lost my sight, but in the end, I had gained something far more precious. I had found a love worth stumbling through the darkness for. On our first anniversary, Adrian surprised me with something I never expected. He led me carefully into the music room where it all began. I could hear the soft rustle of roses, the faint clink of glasses. And then he stopped, his hands trembling as they held mine. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice raw, "I don't have a courtroom anymore. I don't have the career I once thought I needed. But I have you, and that's enough. So I need to ask." He sank to one knee. I couldn't see it, but I felt it shift in air, the tremor in his voice. "Will you let me be your only love? For the rest of our lives?" My throat tightened. My hands shook. And then, without hesitation, I whispered back the only word that mattered. "Yes." That night, as we lay together, his arm draped over me, his breathing steady against my neck, I realized something. I had once thought blindness had stolen my life from me, but in truth it had given me this man, this love, this second chance at happiness. The world would always have its storms, but with him I would never face them alone. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.